Welcome to the Intentional Father Podcast, where us fathers parent our children, not by accident, but with intent. I'm your host, Aaron Stroman. Season 3, Episode 2, titled Custody Trumps Cash. This season is all about going through divorce as a father. Custody trumps cash. The title kind of says it all. When you are going through a divorce, I'm glad some of the details are foggy, but there's temporary orders set. There's the whole legal process. It's a mess. And at some point, childcare and alimony or maintenance is going to come up. And, you know, I mentioned in episode 1, like, avoid divorce if possible. Fight for your marriage while you can. But this episode, we're operating under presumption that divorce is inevitable. And just for the record, I think most people know that my background is in ministry. The church has a reputation of really kind of ranking divorce as one of the worst sins you can commit. I'm going to get into this bit by bit as we go through the season. Divorce isn't the worst sin you can commit. I'll just say that. There's a lot of soapboxes I can get up and stand on, but that's simply not true. If you're going through a divorce, I feel for you. It is not a pleasant experience. It is not fun. You're going to have divided relationships, divided friendships. It's going to cost you a lot of money. It is. Okay, right or wrong, it is. Divorce is messy. It's expensive. As you're going through that process of figuring out how much this is going to cost you, you have your legal fees that you have to pay your own attorney. And then, I think things are changing a little bit where it's not quite so sexist, but in general, usually the man is making more than the woman, if the woman's even making any money. And there's going to be this little financial calculator that the court uses. They plug in income of him and income of her and how many kids and what ages, and it computes all the child care and maintenance or alimony. And I think for the most part, and this is just my experience, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot of negotiation going on there. You also have to divide the assets. And so, and I don't think you get to negotiate that much. I think you have to I think the judge just plugs the numbers in and says, this is what it is. I think if there's any financial battle there, it's proving if the numbers are true. So if she's making more money, but she's trying to hide it, then discovering that. And same, sometimes guys try to hide that stuff. But there's also, in addition to the financial burden, your money's not just going to be the only thing compromised. Your custody with your children is going to be compromised. And one of the stances I took when I was going through divorce, and I was extremely firm on, was I wanted 50-50 custody or more. I didn't want less. Part of that is because I love being a father. I want my kids as much as possible. I also realize that children need their mother. And so I wasn't trying to take more than 50 away from my kid's mother, but I would have accepted it for sure. There was a season where my ex-wife was trying to get more than 50% custody. And man, I fought that battle and I fought it hard. And I let her know, I said, hey, I'm being pretty cooperative through this whole process, but if there's one thing I won't back down on, it's custody of my children. 50-50 is the minimum that you're going to get. If you want less than that, then I would have given her less than 50, but I was not going to accept less than 50% of custody for myself. And I think every father should do the same. Now, I say that sometimes there are parental situations where it's simply not safe for the child to be with a certain parent. I'm not talking about those situations. Obviously, if a man or woman is physically abusive, that's an exception. If there's extensive substance abuse, there's other situations where maybe 50-50 isn't the best situation. But quite often, I think fathers feel like there's just this standard. It's going to be an 80-20, or 90-10, whatever. They're getting a minority of the time. And that is very damaging for the child. Kids need their dad. In fact, there have been so many studies and there's so much evidence out there that if anyone should get less than 50%, and this is in the context of what's best for the child, the studies show that the men should have at least half, if not more, custody if we want to do what's best for the child. And I don't know if I'll put those notes in there. I mean, there's so many sources that show that. Some of them even come from groups that favor the woman / mother, which is it's a really interesting finding. There was a guest with Jordan Peterson. I forget his name. I should probably drop that podcast in the notes. I'll try to look that up and put it in the notes. It shows the exact same thing. And he's an advocate for mothers' rights, but there's still, the guest is on this podcast, but it's the evidence shows kids need their dads, and kids typically end up better as far as behavior and social standing goes when they have more time with their fathers. So when I was going through my divorce, I remember I was talking to this old guy at my church. His name was Steve, and Steve was a really successful guy. He was older, retired, so he would go on mission trips with our youth ministry, and he would volunteer at the church. He drove, I thought it was really cool because he drove a Corvette. And Steve told me, he said, Aaron, when I was your age, maybe a little older, I went through a divorce. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that about you, Steve. And I was complaining about, the whole maintenance thing, and alimony is way more than I was expecting. It was outrageous. I had to get a second job. Of course, the child support, I didn't know anything about child support, and that was a lot of money too. And I was, and I was still going through the divorce process, and okay, we have to split all my assets. I'm going to lose all this retirement. It's going to set me back. It's a punch to the gut whenever you start seeing these numbers. And I won't ever forget what Steve told me. He goes, Steve said, Aaron, you have enough time to recover with your retirement. You're going to make it out of, this temporary extra expense of paying a lawyer. He said, don't fret about that stuff. And don't, I kind of felt like I was getting nickeled and dimed on things. Even like my ex wanted our divorce finalized to be delayed so we could file taxes together for that year, and she wanted half the tax return. All sorts of things where I was just like, geez, I'm just losing money left and right. And he said, don't worry about that stuff. You'll recover. Choose your battles. And that brought a really good perspective, because I looked at this old man who was doing just fine, and he had went through his divorce later in life than I went through mine. So I realized, okay, maybe I can recover. Maybe life isn't just over. And it really helped me prioritize and helped me choose my battles appropriately. And the custody battle, man, that's the one I fought for. And looking back, I don't regret that. I did waste some emotional energy on some of the financial things. Like, whatever, if you want to split taxes, and so our divorce is after the end, 31st of December instead of before it, like, whatever. I probably shouldn't have pushed back as hard against that. But I do not regret 50-50 on the custody thing. And I fought for that. And I would suggest all of you intentional fathers that are going through divorce, don't settle for anything less than 50-50. Now, this kind of goes back to the integrity piece. You have to be a man of integrity who can be trusted with your own children. If you're physically violent with your spouse, you may have forfeited that. That's a reality you may have to face. Can't hit women. You can't hit kids. Shouldn't do drugs. If alcohol's a problem, you shouldn't get drunk. Like that's on you. But if it's anything else, man, fight for that custody, and the court should grant it. And again, you may have to fight for it. You may have to back down, but just let your ex know, or their legal representation, that you're not going to negotiate on it. And if you stand firm, I promise you won't regret it. You will not regret it. I don't. It gives you the opportunity to be the intentional father that God has called you to be. So fight for that custody. Keep your priorities. Kids matter. Money doesn't. Obviously, you're going to, you just don't want to like roll over and go belly up with the finances. But don't let that be what keeps you up at night. Make sure you get good custody of your kids. So there were no regrets on my part for doing that. I hope this is beneficial to you. And man, if you're going through this right now, I feel for you. I'm sorry. If you just need some encouragement, feel free to reach out and contact me. Divorce is tough, but there are tougher things in life, and you'll get through this. So let this be an encouragement to you. God bless.